You have exactly 48 hours before they come for the house, Evangeline. The crystal whiskey glass slipped from Evangeline Rosewood's fingers, shattering against the marble floor of their Charleston mansion study. Her father, Cornelius, didn't even flinch at the sound. He stood behind his mahogany desk, his hands trembling as he shuffled through a stack of legal documents that might as well have been death certificates. "What are you talking about?" Evangeline's voice came out smaller than she intended. Cornelius finally looked up, his once proud face now gaunt and hollow. "The Pemberton Syndicate. I owe them $12 million. $12 million. The number hung in the air like poison gas. Evangeline gripped the leather armchair beside her, feeling the room tilt. Their family had money, old Charleston money, but $12 million was enough to bury 3 generations of Rosewoods. How is that even possible? Underground poker. High-stakes betting on corporate mergers. Cornelius's voice cracked. "I thought I could win it back. You thought you could gamble our lives away." The words tasted bitter. Evangeline had watched her father's slow descent over the past year. The mysterious late-night phone calls, the locked doors, the paranoid glances over his shoulder. She'd assumed it was business stress. She'd never imagined this. Cornelius moved around the desk, reaching for her hands, but she stepped back. "There's a way out. I've already made the arrangements." Something cold crawled up Evangeline's spine. "What arrangements?" "Maximilian Blackthorne has agreed to pay the debt in exchange for your hand in marriage." The words hit her like a physical blow. She actually staggered backward, her hip colliding with the desk corner. "You're insane. He's one of the wealthiest men in Manhattan. He needs a wife for social appearances, and we need nothing from him." Evangeline's voice rose to near shouting. "This isn't the 19th century, Dad. You can't just sell me off like livestock. They'll kill us both if we don't pay." Cornelius grabbed her shoulders, his grip desperate. "Vincent Pemberton doesn't make idle threats. He's already had our phones tapped, our mail intercepted. Yesterday, I found one of his men sitting in our neighbor's garden, watching the house." Evangeline wrenched free from his grasp. The study that had once felt like a sanctuary now felt like a trap. Family portraits stared down at her from the walls. Generations of Rosewoods who'd built their fortune through cotton plantations and shipping magnates. None of them had ever been sold to pay gambling debts. Why Blackthorne? What does he get out of this? Cornelius walked to the window, pulling back the heavy curtain. A black sedan sat parked across the street, just as he'd described. He's 32, never been married, completely focused on business. His board of directors has been pressuring him to settle down, present a more stable image for investors. A Charleston debutante with an impeccable family name gives him exactly what he needs. "My family name won't be impeccable when people find out you auctioned off your daughter. No one will find out. As far as society knows, you met at the Ashford Charity Gala last month and had a whirlwind romance." Evangeline felt sick. She remembered the Ashford Gala, remembered the boring speeches about cancer research funding. Had her father already been planning this then? Had he been calculating her worth while she'd been dancing with Charleston's eligible bachelors, completely unaware that her freedom was being bartered away? "I won't do it." "You will." Cornelius's voice turned hard. "Because if you don't, we'll both be dead by Sunday, and the Rosewood name dies with us." The phone on his desk rang, shrill and demanding. Both of them froze. Cornelius's hand hovered over the receiver for a long moment before he finally answered. "Rosewood." Even from across the room, Evangeline could hear the deep, controlled voice on the other end. "Maximilian Blackthorne. Her future husband, apparently." "Yes," she's agreed. Cornelius lied smoothly. "Tomorrow evening will be perfect for dinner. The Riverside Club at 8. He hung up and turned to face her. "You have until tomorrow night to make peace with this, Evangeline. Because ready or not, you're meeting your fiancé." Evangeline walked to the window and stared at the black sedan. The man inside wore sunglasses despite the late afternoon shadows. His head turned slightly when she appeared at the window, as if he'd been waiting for her to look. She thought about running. She had friends in Atlanta, college roommates who would hide her until she could figure out what to do. But they'd find her eventually. Men like Vincent Pemberton didn't give up easily, and they certainly didn't forgive $12 million debts. "What's he like?" she asked without turning around. "Blackthorne. Cold. Efficient. He built his fortune by buying failing companies and stripping them for parts. But he's not cruel, just detached." "Detached?" What a romantic quality in a husband. Evangeline pressed her forehead against the cool glass. Will he hurt me? The question hung in the silence for too long. When Cornelius finally answered, his voice was barely a whisper. I don't know. 24 hours later, Evangeline sat in the Riverside Club's private dining room, wearing her mother's pearl necklace and a black dress that suddenly felt too much like funeral attire. The man across from her cut his steak with surgical precision, each movement calculated and economical. Maximilian Blackthorne was nothing like she'd expected. No gold teeth or gaudy jewelry, no obvious signs of new money trying to buy respectability. He wore a perfectly tailored charcoal suit and spoke in the measured tones of old East Coast wealth. His dark hair was perfectly styled, his jaw clean-shaven, his gray eyes completely unreadable. He was also devastatingly handsome, which somehow made everything worse. Your father explained the terms, he said without looking up from his plate. Did he? Evangeline hadn't touched her food. What exactly are the terms of my purchase? That got his attention. He set down his knife and fork, finally meeting her eyes. Marriage within 2 weeks. You'll live in my Manhattan penthouse and accompany me to social functions as needed. In return, your father's debts disappear. And what do you get besides arm candy? Stability, respectability, the appearance of a settled family man. He picked up his wine glass, studying the burgundy liquid. My investors prefer to work with married men. It suggests reliability. How wonderfully romantic. The corner of his mouth almost turned up. Almost. Romance wasn't part of the negotiation. Evangeline leaned back in her chair, studying him. There was something underneath his controlled exterior, a flicker of something that might have been pain. But it disappeared so quickly she might have imagined it. What if I say no? You won't. You seem very confident about that. Maximilian set down his wine glass and pulled out his phone. He scrolled through something, then turned the screen toward her. It was a photograph of her father getting into a car, but there were 3 men in dark suits walking very close behind him. Your father is currently under protection, Maximilian said. My protection? The moment you walk away from this table, that protection ends. Evangeline's throat closed up. You're threatening me. I'm offering you a choice. Marry me, and both of you live comfortably. Refuse, and see how long your father survives Vincent Pemberton's hospitality. The restaurant around them continued its quiet dinner service, crystal clinking, conversations murmuring, completely oblivious to the fact that her entire life was being decided over wine and steak. Evangeline looked at the photo again, at her father's terrified face, at the men who looked like they were escorting him to his execution. 2 weeks, she said finally. 2 weeks. And after the wedding? After the wedding, you're Mrs. Maximilian Blackthorne. Everything that entails. The way he said it made her shiver, though she couldn't tell if it was from fear or something else entirely. The wedding ceremony lasted exactly 17 minutes. Evangeline stood in the private chapel of St. Matthew's Cathedral, her hands gripping a bouquet of white roses that someone else had chosen, wearing a dress that someone else had paid for, speaking vows that someone else had written. The only familiar face in the small gathering was her father's, and even he looked like a stranger sitting in the front pew with his nervous smile and trembling hands. Maximilian's voice was steady as he recited his part, each word precise and emotionless. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, he kissed her cheek with all the passion of a business handshake. The few guests applauded politely, but it sounded hollow in the vast space. Mrs. Maximilian Blackthorne. The name felt foreign on her tongue. The reception was held at the Plaza Hotel, another affair orchestrated by Maximilian's people. Evangeline moved through the crowd like a ghost, accepting congratulations from strangers who spoke about what a lovely couple they made and how romantic it was that they'd found each other so quickly. She smiled and nodded and played her part, all while feeling like she was watching someone else's life unfold. Victoria Pemberton appeared at her elbow during the cake cutting, a striking blonde woman in her early 30s with calculating blue eyes and a smile that didn't reach past her lips. Such a beautiful ceremony, Victoria said, her southern accent polished to perfection. Though I have to admit, I was surprised when Max told me he was getting married. He's always been so focused on work. You know my husband well. We've been business partners for years. I handle public relations for Blackthorne Industries. Victoria's smile sharpened. Among other things, there was something in her tone that made Evangeline's skin crawl, but before she could respond, Maximilian appeared beside them. His hand settled on the small of Evangeline's back, possessive and warm through the silk of her dress. Victoria, I didn't expect to see you here. I wouldn't miss your wedding, darling. Victoria's eyes flicked between them. Though I hope marriage won't change your dedication to our upcoming projects. Nothing changes. The conversation continued around Evangeline, but she stopped listening. Maximilian's hand had moved to her waist, his thumb tracing small circles against her hip bone. The simple touch sent unexpected heat through her body, and she found herself leaning slightly into his side before catching herself. When Victoria finally drifted away, Maximilian's grip tightened. We're leaving in 10 minutes. Where are we going? Home. The penthouse occupied the entire top floor of a glass tower overlooking Central Park. Evangeline had seen luxury before, but this was something different entirely. Everything was sleek and modern and expensive, from the marble floors to the floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a breathtaking view of Manhattan's skyline. It was beautiful and cold and felt absolutely nothing like home. Your room is down the hall, Maximilian said, loosening his tie as he walked toward what she assumed was his office. Mrs. Chun will show you where everything is. An older Asian woman appeared as if summoned, her expression kind but professional. Mrs. Blackthorne, welcome. Would you like me to show you to your suite? Suite. Not room, suite. Because of course her prison would be luxurious. The suite was larger than her entire childhood bedroom back in Charleston. It had its own sitting area, walk-in closet, and bathroom with a soaking tub that could fit 3 people. Someone had already unpacked her belongings, her clothes hanging in the massive closet looking lost and inadequate among the empty space. Mrs. Chun left her alone with promises of dinner at 7. Evangeline sat on the edge of the king-sized bed and stared out at the city lights beginning to twinkle in the gathering dusk. She was Mrs. Maximilian Blackthorne now, mistress of this glass tower, but she felt more trapped than she had in the Charleston mansion with Pemberton's men watching from the street. At least there she'd known what was expected of her. Dinner was served in a dining room that could seat 20 people. Maximilian had changed into dark slacks and a white button-down shirt, the sleeves rolled up to reveal strong forearms. He looked younger without the formal suit, more approachable, though his expression remained carefully neutral. The master bedroom is across the hall from yours, he said without preamble as Mrs. Chun served the soup course. Connected by a sitting room. Evangeline's spoon paused halfway to her mouth. I see. I don't expect you to share my bed immediately. This arrangement will take time to adjust to. How considerate. He looked up at her tone, something sharp flickering in his gray eyes. Would you prefer I demand my husbandly rights on our wedding night? The words sent heat flooding through her cheeks. I would prefer honesty about what you expect from this marriage. I expect you to fulfill your role as my wife in public. What happens in private will develop naturally. And if it doesn't develop at all? Maximilian set down his spoon, his attention fully focused on her now. Are you asking if I'll force you? The question hung between them, heavy with implication. Evangeline met his gaze steadily, refusing to look away even as her heart hammered against her ribs. I'm asking what happens if I never feel anything for you beyond resentment. Then we'll have a very long and very cold marriage. His honesty was somehow worse than a lie would have been. At least a lie would have given her something to fight against. This matter-of-fact acceptance of their mutual indifference felt like a death sentence. They finished the meal in silence. Afterward, Maximilian disappeared into his office while Evangeline explored the penthouse. Every room was a study in expensive minimalism, all clean lines and neutral colors. There were no family photos, no personal touches, nothing that revealed anything about the man she'd married. She found herself in his study, a room lined with legal books and financial journals. His desk was immaculate except for a single framed photograph tucked into the corner. A young woman with dark hair and laughing eyes, maybe 20 years old, standing beside a much younger version of Maximilian. They had the same nose, the same stubborn chin. That's Serafina. Evangeline spun around, her heart jumping. Maximilian stood in the doorway, his expression unreadable. Your sister? She died 5 years ago. There was something in his voice that made her take a step back from the desk. Pain, carefully controlled but unmistakably real. I'm sorry. He crossed to the desk and picked up the photograph, his thumb tracing over the glass. She was the only family I had left. What happened? The question came out before she could stop it. Maximilian's jaw tightened, and for a moment she thought he wouldn't answer. Car accident. At least, that's what the police called it. He set the photo down, but his eyes remained fixed on it. She was driving home from college. Her brakes failed on a mountain curve. At least, Maximilian looked at her then, and she saw something dangerous flicker in his expression. Serafina was an engineering student. She could rebuild an engine blindfolded. She never would have driven a car with faulty brakes. The implication hit her like a physical blow. You think someone killed her? I know someone killed her. I just could never prove it. The room felt suddenly cold despite the warmth of the evening. Evangeline wrapped her arms around herself, trying to process what he'd just told her. Why would someone want to hurt her? Because they wanted to hurt me. His voice was flat, emotionless, but she could see the fury burning behind his eyes. Serafina died because I made enemies. Because I destroyed the wrong companies, exposed the wrong people. Have you found out who? Not yet, but I will. The quiet certainty in his voice made her shiver. This wasn't grief speaking, it was vengeance. Cold, patient, and absolutely ruthless. Maximilian walked to the window, his hands clasped behind his back. You should go to bed. Tomorrow we start the public appearances. It was clearly a dismissal, but Evangeline found herself reluctant to leave. For the first time since she'd met him, Maximilian Blackthorne seemed human. Damaged, dangerous, but human. Max. He turned at the sound of his name, surprise flickering across his features. I know this isn't what either of us wanted, but we're married now. Maybe we could try to make the best of it. For a long moment, he just stared at her. Then his expression shuddered again, walls slamming back into place. Good night, Evangeline. She left him standing alone in his study, surrounded by his books and his grief and his carefully controlled rage. In her suite, she changed into a silk nightgown that felt too delicate for her mood and climbed into the enormous bed. Through the walls, she could hear him moving around in the master bedroom. Water running, drawers opening and closing, the soft sound of his footsteps on the hardwood floor. When everything finally went quiet, she lay in the darkness and wondered what kind of man she'd married. A man capable of vengeance, certainly, but also a man capable of love, at least for his dead sister. The photograph on his desk proved that much. As sleep finally claimed her, Evangeline found herself thinking about the way his thumb had traced over Serafina's face, gentle and reverent. Would he ever touch her like that? And more disturbing still, why did she find herself hoping that someday he might? 3 weeks into their marriage, Evangeline discovered that her husband was never home. Maximilian left before dawn and returned after midnight. Their only interactions the stilted conversations over breakfast when their schedules aligned. He was polite, distant, and completely absent from her daily life. She began to wonder if he was avoiding her on purpose or if this was simply how he lived. Mrs. Chun became her primary source of information about the man she'd married. The housekeeper had worked for the Blackthorne family for over 15 years, and while she was discreet, she wasn't unkind. Mr. Max works too much, she said one morning as she served Evangeline coffee in the breakfast nook. Always has, but worse since Miss Serafina died. What was she like? Mrs. Chin's expression softened. Full of life. She could make Mr. Max laugh until his sides hurt. After she died, he stopped laughing altogether. That evening, Evangeline found herself alone in the penthouse again. She'd attended a charity luncheon that afternoon as Mrs. Maximilian Blackthorne, smiling and making small talk about causes she didn't understand with women who treated her like a fascinating specimen. The performance was exhausting. She wandered into Maximilian's study, drawn by a restlessness she couldn't shake. The photograph of Serafina still sat on his desk, but tonight she noticed other details. A stack of files marked Pemberton Industries, a legal pad covered with notes in Maximilian's precise handwriting, and a business card for a private investigator tucked between the pages of a financial journal. The sound of the elevator arriving made her jump back from the desk. Maximilian appeared in the doorway moments later, his tie loosened and his shirt sleeves rolled up. He looked tired, older than his 32 years. Looking for something? Heat flooded her cheeks. I was just snooping. But he didn't sound angry, just resigned. Find anything interesting? Pemberton Industries. That's Vincent Pemberton's company, isn't it? The man my father owes money to. Maximilian walked to the bar cart in the corner and poured himself 2 fingers of scotch. Your father doesn't owe him anything anymore. But you're still investigating him. Vincent Pemberton has his fingers in a lot of dirty business. Money laundering, illegal gambling, extortion. He took a sip of his drink, watching her over the rim of the glass. The kind of business that gets people killed. The implication hung in the air between them. Evangeline sank into the leather chair across from his desk, her legs suddenly unsteady. You think he killed Serafina? I think he's connected to everyone who benefits from keeping certain investigations buried. Maximilian set down his glass and pulled out a file folder. Serafina was working on a project for her engineering class. Environmental impact studies for construction sites around the city. She'd identified several locations where companies were dumping toxic waste illegally. He handed her a photograph from the file. It showed a young woman with dark hair bent over blueprints, her expression serious and focused. Serafina, but not the laughing girl from the framed photo on his desk. 3 of the companies she was investigating had ties to Pemberton Industries. Shell companies, dummy corporations, but the money trail led back to him. Evangeline studied the photograph, noting the resemblance between the siblings. Did she know she was in danger? She started getting threatening phone calls 2 weeks before she died. Anonymous voices telling her to drop her research project. Maximilian's jaw tightened. I told her to take it to the police, but she was stubborn. Said she could handle it herself. She was trying to protect you. The words came out before Evangeline could stop them, but she knew they were true. Serafina had been trying to shield her older brother from whatever consequences her investigation might bring. Maximilian's expression darkened. She died because I wasn't there to protect her. Because I was too busy building my empire to notice my sister was in trouble. There was so much pain in his voice that Evangeline found herself reaching across the desk to touch his hand. His skin was warm, calloused from whatever work he did when he wasn't wearing expensive suits. It wasn't your fault, wasn't it? He didn't pull away from her touch, but his muscles tensed. I made enemies, Evangeline. Powerful enemies who don't hesitate to hurt innocent people to get what they want. Is that why you married me? To keep me safe from them? The question surprised them both. Maximilian stared down at their joined hands, his thumb unconsciously stroking over her knuckles. I married you because your father's debt gave me leverage against Pemberton. But keeping you safe. He looked up, meeting her eyes. Yes, that matters too. Something shifted in the air between them, a current of awareness that made Evangeline's pulse quicken. She was suddenly conscious of how close they were, how the lamplight cast shadows across his face, making him look younger and more vulnerable. Max. Yes. What happens now? With the investigation, I mean. He released her hand and leaned back in his chair, the moment broken. Now I find proof. Real evidence that links Pemberton to Serafina's death. And then I destroy him. The cold certainty in his voice should have frightened her, but instead it made her feel oddly protected. This man, her husband, was capable of ruthless vengeance, but he was also capable of fierce loyalty. She was beginning to understand which side of that equation she fell on. A soft chime from his computer interrupted her thoughts. Maximilian frowned and clicked on an email notification, his expression growing darker as he read. What is it? Victoria. She's moved up tomorrow's board meeting. He scrolled through the message, his frown deepening. She wants to discuss the Ashford Foundation merger. The cancer research charity? Among other things. The foundation handles environmental cleanup projects too. Maximilian closed the laptop with more force than necessary. Interesting timing, considering what we've been discussing. Evangeline felt a chill run down her spine. You think Victoria is involved? Victoria Pemberton doesn't do anything without her uncle's approval. And Vincent Pemberton has a talent for inserting himself into profitable charitable causes. The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. Victoria Pemberton, as in Vincent Pemberton's family. The woman who'd been so interested in their marriage, who'd made veiled comments about Maximilian's dedication to their business projects. She's been your business partner for how long? 3 years. Since right after Serafina died. Of course. Just long enough to position herself perfectly to monitor Maximilian's activities, to report back to her uncle about any investigations he might be pursuing. Max, you have to be careful. If she suspects you're getting close to the truth. She already suspects. He stood and walked to the window, his reflection ghost-like in the dark glass. Which means they'll be making moves soon. What kind of moves? He turned back to face her, and she saw something in his expression that made her blood run cold. Not fear, but anticipation. He was looking forward to whatever came next, the kind that will force them to show their hand. Evangeline rose from her chair, suddenly needing to be closer to him. Promise me you'll be careful. I've been careful for 5 years. It hasn't gotten me anywhere. Promise me anyway. He studied her face, searching for something. Whatever he found there seemed to satisfy him, because his expression softened slightly. I promise I won't do anything unnecessarily reckless. It wasn't exactly what she'd asked for, but it was probably the best she was going to get from a man whose idea of patience involved 5 years of careful investigation and strategic positioning. There's something else, Maximilian said. The Pemberton Foundation Gala is next week. We'll be expected to attend. Together, as husband and wife. It'll be the first time we've appeared publicly since the wedding. The thought of facing Victoria Pemberton again, knowing what she now knew about the woman's family connections, made Evangeline's stomach clench. But she also felt a strange thrill at the idea of finally doing something useful, of being more than just a decorative wife acquired to settle debts. What do you need me to do? Maximilian's eyebrows rose slightly. You want to help? Serafina was family. That makes her my family too now. The words felt true as she spoke them, surprising her with their certainty. Besides, I'm tired of being useless. For the first time since she'd known him, Maximilian smiled. Not the polite social smile he wore at business functions, but something real and warm that transformed his entire face. In that case, Mrs. Blackthorne, we need to discuss your cover story. The way he said her married name, with a new note of respect and something that might have been affection, made warmth spread through her chest. They were partners now, united in purpose if not yet in heart. As they spent the next hour planning their approach to the gala, Evangeline found herself watching the way Maximilian's hands moved as he spoke, the way his eyes lit up when he talked about strategy. He was brilliant and driven and completely focused on justice for his sister. She was also beginning to realize that somewhere in the past 3 weeks, without her notice or permission, she'd started falling for her husband. The Pemberton Foundation Gala was held at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, the Temple of Dinder providing a dramatic backdrop for New York's elite to display their charitable generosity. Evangeline stood beside Maximilian in the receiving line, her hand resting lightly on his arm as they greeted other guests with practiced smiles. She wore a midnight blue gown that hugged her curves and fell in elegant waves to the floor, her mother's diamonds glittering at her throat. Maximilian had chosen the dress himself, his eyes darkening with appreciation when she'd emerged from her dressing room. The look he'd given her had sent heat pooling low in her belly, a reaction that was becoming increasingly difficult to ignore. Vincent Pemberton, 3 o'clock, Maximilian murmured against her ear, his breath warm against her skin. Evangeline turned slightly and spotted a silver-haired man in an expensive tuxedo working his way through the crowd. He was shorter than she'd expected, with the soft build of someone who'd never done physical labor. But there was something predatory in his pale blue eyes that made her skin crawl. He looks like a banker. The most dangerous ones usually do. Victoria appeared beside her uncle, resplendent in scarlet silk that complemented her blonde hair. She moved with the confident grace of someone who knew she was being watched and admired, her smile bright and social as she greeted the other guests. "Showtime," Maximilian said quietly. They made their way through the crowd, stopping to chat with other couples about safe topics like the museum's latest acquisitions and upcoming charity auctions. Evangeline played her part perfectly, the devoted new wife hanging on her husband's every word, but her attention was focused on the Pembertons. Victoria spotted them first, her smile widening as she approached with her uncle in tow. "Max, darling, you look wonderful. And Evangeline, that dress is absolutely stunning." Victoria's eyes swept over the gown with calculating assessment. "Very custom Armani," Evangeline replied smoothly. "Max has excellent taste." "He certainly does." Victoria's gaze lingered on Maximilian with an intimacy that made Evangeline's jaw clench. "Uncle Vincent, you remember Max Blackthorne and his new wife?" Vincent Pemberton extended a manicured hand, his grip firm but not aggressive. "Congratulations on your marriage, Mr. Blackthorne. I hope you'll both be very happy together." "Thank you. Allow me to introduce my wife, Evangeline." "Evangeline, this is Vincent Pemberton, Victoria's uncle." Evangeline accepted Vincent's handshake, fighting the urge to wipe her palm afterward. Up close, his eyes were even more unsettling, like chips of ice that seemed to see too much. A pleasure to meet you, my dear. Victoria tells me you're from Charleston originally. Born and raised. Though I'm finding Manhattan much more exciting. I'm sure you are. Old Southern families can be quite stifling, can't they? Vincent's smile was paternal, but something cold flickered behind it. Sometimes a complete break from the past is exactly what a young woman needs. The comment felt loaded with hidden meaning, but before Evangeline could respond, Victoria linked arms with her. Come, let me introduce you to some people. The wives in our circle can be intimidating at first, but you'll find your place. Evangeline glanced at Maximilian, who gave an almost imperceptible nod. They'd planned this separation, knowing it would give them both opportunities to gather information. Victoria led her through the crowd, stopping to make introductions with various society women who welcomed Evangeline with the kind of polite interest reserved for new additions to their exclusive club. The conversations were superficial but revealing, painting a picture of the social hierarchy that ruled Manhattan's upper echelons. How are you adjusting to married life? Victoria asked as they found a quiet corner near the Egyptian artifacts. Max can be quite intense. He's passionate about his work. Work, yes, but what about other things? Victoria's tone was casual, but her eyes were sharp. Has he told you about Serafina? Evangeline's pulse quickened, but she kept her expression neutral. His sister? He mentioned she died in an accident. Accident. Victoria repeated the word like it tasted bitter. Poor Max never did accept that some things are simply tragic coincidences. What do you mean? Victoria glanced around, then leaned closer. He's convinced someone killed her. He spent the last 5 years chasing shadows, seeing conspiracies where there are only unfortunate circumstances. That must be difficult for him. It's consuming him. His business judgment has become clouded, his decision-making erratic. Victoria's hand settled on Evangeline's arm, her grip gentle but somehow threatening. I've tried to help him move on, but he won't listen to reason. There was something in Victoria's voice that made Evangeline's skin prickle. Not concern for Maximilian's well-being, but frustration at his persistence. Maybe he just needs time to grieve. 5 years isn't enough time. Victoria's mask slipped for just a moment, revealing something cold and calculating underneath. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for someone is help them face reality. Before Evangeline could respond, Maximilian appeared at her side, his hand settling possessively on her waist. Victoria, I hope you haven't been monopolizing my wife all evening. Just getting acquainted. Evangeline was asking about Serafina. The temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Maximilian's grip on Evangeline's waist tightened, and she could feel the tension radiating from his body. Was she? I hope you don't mind, Evangeline said carefully. I wanted to understand more about your family. Serafina would have liked you, Maximilian said, his voice softer. She always said I needed someone who wasn't afraid to ask difficult questions. Victoria's smile became strained. Well, I should let you two enjoy the rest of the evening. Uncle Vincent wanted to discuss the Foundation's new environmental initiative with the board members. She glided away, leaving them alone among the ancient artifacts. Maximilian watched her go, his expression unreadable. What did she tell you? That you're obsessed with conspiracy theories and need to move on from your sister's death. Evangeline kept her voice low, conscious of the other guests nearby. She made it sound like she's been trying to help you heal. Victoria Pemberton has never helped anyone but herself. Maximilian's jaw was tight with controlled anger. What else? She seemed frustrated that you won't listen to reason. And she was very interested in whether you told me about Serafina. Maximilian was quiet for a long moment, processing the information. Around them, the gala continued its elegant dance, society's elite admiring priceless artifacts while plotting their own schemes for power and influence. She's fishing, he said finally, trying to determine how much you know and whether you're a threat. Am I? A threat, I mean. He looked down at her, something unreadable flickering in his gray eyes. That depends on what you choose to do with the information I've shared. It was a test, Evangeline realized. He was giving her the chance to walk away, to choose the safe path of ignorance and social climbing that Victoria was offering. The smart thing would be to smile and nod and become the decorative wife everyone expected her to be. Instead, she moved closer to him, her body pressing against his side. I choose to stand with my husband. The words came out with more conviction than she'd expected. Somewhere over the past weeks, this arranged marriage had become something real, at least on her side. She cared about Maximilian, about his pain and his quest for justice. She cared about Serafina, a young woman she'd never met, but whose ghost haunted every corner of their home. Maximilian's hand came up to cup her cheek, his thumb tracing the line of her jaw with devastating gentleness. "You don't know what you're signing up for. Then tell me." He was quiet for so long that she thought he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "Vincent Pemberton doesn't just kill people who threaten his business interests. He destroys them completely. Their families, their reputations, their entire lives." His thumb continued its gentle caress. "If he decides you're a threat, there won't be anywhere in the world you can hide. But you're going after him anyway." "I have to. Serafina deserves justice." Evangeline covered his hand with hers, pressing his palm more firmly against her cheek. "Then we go after him together." Something shifted in Maximilian's expression, a wall crumbling that she hadn't even realized was there. For the first time since their wedding, he looked at her like she was his wife instead of an obligation. "Together," he repeated, as if testing how the word felt. "Together." He leaned down, his forehead resting against hers. They stood like that for a moment, connected and conspiratorial among the ancient Egyptian treasures, while the party swirled around them. When they finally separated, Evangeline felt like something fundamental had changed between them. They were no longer strangers bound by convenience and necessity. They were partners, united in purpose and perhaps something deeper. "There's something else you should know," Maximilian said as they made their way toward the exit. "I've been tracking financial records for companies connected to Pemberton Industries. 3 of them have been making regular payments to a private facility upstate." "What kind of facility?" "The kind that doesn't officially exist. No public records, no government oversight." His expression was grim. The kind of place where someone could be held indefinitely without anyone asking questions. Evangeline's blood turned to ice. "You think Serafina might be alive?" "I think it's possible. Which means everything I thought I knew about her death might be wrong." The revelation hit her like a physical blow. If Serafina was alive, if she'd been imprisoned for 5 years while her brother mourned her death and planned his revenge, then the stakes of their investigation had just become infinitely higher and infinitely more dangerous. As they walked through the museum's marble halls toward the exit, Evangeline felt the weight of Vincent Pemberton's gaze following them. He knew something had changed tonight, that the dynamic between her and Maximilian had shifted. She had the unsettling feeling that their real battle was just beginning. The private investigator's office smelled like stale coffee and disappointment. Detective Ray Morrison had been a cop for 20 years before going private, and his weathered face showed every one of those years. He spread a collection of photographs across his cluttered desk while Maximilian and Evangeline leaned forward to examine them. "The facility is called Millbrook Recovery Center," Morrison said, tapping one of the aerial shots. "Officially, it's a high-end rehabilitation clinic for wealthy clients who want complete privacy. Unofficially, it's a black site where inconvenient people disappear." Evangeline studied the images of a sprawling compound surrounded by high walls and security cameras. "How many patients?" "Hard to say. The staff turnover is suspiciously high, and no one talks. But I managed to get these from a nurse who quit last month." Morrison slid another photograph across the desk. It showed a woman with dark hair walking in what appeared to be a garden courtyard, her back to the camera. Even from behind, the resemblance to Maximilian was unmistakable. Maximilian's hand clenched into a fist on the desk. "How recent is this?" 3 weeks ago. The nurse confirmed the woman goes by the name Sarah, claims to have amnesia from a car accident 5 years ago. Morrison's expression was grim. "Thing is, she's not trying to recover her memory. She's actively afraid of it." "Afraid?" The nurse said Sarah has panic attacks whenever anyone mentions her past, like she's been conditioned to fear remembering. Evangeline felt sick. The implications of what Morrison was describing painted a picture of systematic psychological torture that made her stomach clench. "We need to get her out of there," she said. "It's not that simple," Morrison replied. "The facility has private security, political connections, and enough lawyers to bury anyone who asks too many questions. You'd need ironclad evidence of wrongdoing to get law enforcement involved." "What about the financial records Max mentioned? The payments from Pemberton's companies?" Morrison nodded toward a thick file folder. I've traced the money trail. Shell companies, offshore accounts, dummy corporations, but it all leads back to Vincent Pemberton. He's been funding Millbrook for 5 years, right around the time your sister supposedly died. Maximilian was studying the photograph of the woman in the garden, his jaw tight with controlled emotion. I need to see her myself. Max, no. Evangeline grabbed his arm. If it really is Serafina, and they're keeping her there against her will, showing up will only put her in more danger. She's been trapped for 5 years. I'm not leaving her there another day. And what happens when you get yourself killed trying to break into a private facility with armed security? Evangeline's voice rose with frustration. Then both of you are gone, and Pemberton wins. Morrison cleared his throat. Actually, there might be another way. The facility hosts a charity fundraiser every month. High-profile donors get tours of the public areas. Can you get us in? For the right price, I can get you on the guest list. But it's dangerous. If they recognize you, if they suspect why you're really there, they won't recognize me, Evangeline said suddenly. Both men turned to look at her. Serafina doesn't know I exist. To her, I'm just another wealthy donor. I could get close to her, confirm her identity, maybe even talk to her. Absolutely not. Maximilian's response was immediate and final. I won't put you at risk like that. You said we were partners. Partners don't send each other into enemy territory alone. Evangeline stood, her patience finally snapping. Stop trying to protect me from everything, Max. I'm not made of glass, and I'm tired of being treated like I am. The argument continued in the car on the way back to the penthouse, their voices sharp with tension and fear. By the time they reached their building, they were barely speaking to each other. You're being unreasonable, Maximilian said as they rode the elevator up. I'm being practical. You're being emotional. Of course I'm being emotional. She's my sister. The elevator doors opened, and they walked into the penthouse in hostile silence. Mrs. Chun had left dinner prepared, but neither of them had any appetite for food or polite conversation. Evangeline retreated to her suite and tried to lose herself in a book, but the words blurred together on the page. Through the connecting door, she could hear Maximilian pacing in his office, the occasional slam of a file drawer punctuating his restless movement. Around midnight, she gave up any pretense of sleep and padded barefoot to the kitchen for a glass of water. She found Maximilian standing at the floor-to-ceiling windows, still dressed in his suit from earlier, a tumbler of whiskey in his hand. Can't sleep either? He turned at the sound of her voice, his eyes tracking over her silk nightgown and bare legs before meeting her gaze. Every time I close my eyes, I see her in that place. Evangeline moved to stand beside him at the window. The city sprawled out below them, millions of lights twinkling in the darkness like earthbound stars. Tell me about her. What was Serafina like before? Maximilian was quiet for so long that she thought he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft with memory. Brilliant. Stubborn. She could fix anything with an engine, but she couldn't balance a checkbook to save her life. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. She used to sneak into my room during thunderstorms when she was little. Said the lightning was just the sky throwing a tantrum. She sounds wonderful. She was the best person I knew. Kind to everyone. Fearless about standing up for what was right. His expression darkened. Maybe too fearless. Evangeline set down her water glass and turned to face him fully. Max, what happened between you and my father? I mean really happened, not the official story about gambling debts. Maximilian's grip tightened on his whiskey glass. Your father was laundering money for Pemberton Industries through his shipping company. When Serafina started investigating environmental violations, she stumbled across the financial records. The words hit Evangeline like a physical blow. She'd suspected her father was hiding something, but this was worse than she'd imagined. He knew what they were doing to her. He gave them the shipping manifest that placed Serafina at the contaminated sites on specific dates. Made it look like she was taking bribes instead of exposing the truth. Evangeline felt bile rise in her throat. Her own father had helped frame an innocent woman and cover up her kidnapping. That's why you married me. Not to protect me from Pemberton, but to get revenge on my father. The accusation hung in the air between them like poison. Maximilian didn't deny it, which somehow made it worse than if he'd lied. At first, yes. And now? He set down his glass and turned to face her, his expression raw with an honesty that made her chest ache. Now I'm terrified that loving you is going to get you killed." The confession stole the breath from her lungs. Love. He'd said love, not want or need or convenient affection. Love. Max, I can't lose you too, Evangeline. I won't survive it. She reached up to cup his face in her hands, feeling the tension in his jaw, the barely controlled emotion that he kept locked away from the rest of the world. "You're not going to lose me. You don't know that. You don't know what these people are capable of. Then show me. Stop trying to protect me from the truth and show me exactly what we're up against." Maximilian searched her face, looking for something. Whatever he found there must have convinced him, because he nodded slowly. "Tomorrow night, there's a board meeting at Blackthorn Industries. Victoria has been pushing for the Ashford Foundation merger, but I've been stalling. She's getting suspicious." "What kind of suspicious?" "The kind that ends with us both disappearing like Serafina did." Fear spiked through Evangeline's bloodstream, but underneath it was something stronger. Determination. Whatever happened next, they would face it together. "What do you need me to do?" "Victoria thinks you're just a pretty trophy wife who doesn't understand business. Let her keep thinking that. But listen to everything. Remember every detail. And if she suspects I'm more than decorative?" Maximilian's hands settled on her waist, pulling her closer. "Then we run. Fast and far, and pray we can stay ahead of them long enough to expose the truth." Evangeline pressed herself against him, feeling the solid warmth of his body, the steady beat of his heart beneath her palms. Tomorrow they would walk into the lion's den, but tonight they had each other. "I love you too," she whispered against his throat. His arms tightened around her, and she felt some of the tension leave his body. They stood like that for a long time, holding each other in the darkness while the city hummed around them. When Maximilian finally spoke, his voice was rough with emotion. "If something happens to me tomorrow night, I need you to promise me something." "Nothing's going to happen. Promise me anyway." His hands framed her face, forcing her to meet his eyes. "If I don't make it out of that meeting, you take Morrison's evidence to the FBI and you disappear. New identity, new life, somewhere Pemberton can't find you. I'm not leaving you. You are if I tell you to. Promise me, Evangeline." She wanted to argue, to tell him that she'd rather die than live without him, but the desperation in his voice stopped her. He needed to know she would be safe if everything went wrong. "I promise." Relief flooded his expression. He kissed her then, soft and desperate, and full of all the things they might never get the chance to say. When they finally broke apart, both of them were breathing hard. "Come to bed with me," he said against her lips. It wasn't a question, and it wasn't about desire, though that was certainly part of it. It was about connection, about holding on to each other in the face of an uncertain future. Evangeline took his hand and let him lead her to the master bedroom, where they made love with a tenderness and urgency that spoke of new love and impending danger. Afterward, she fell asleep in his arms, her head on his chest, listening to the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. She didn't dream of the future or the past, only of the present moment and the man who held her like she was his anchor in a storm-tossed sea. The Blackthorn Industries boardroom occupied the entire 40th floor, its glass walls offering a commanding view of Manhattan's financial district. Evangeline sat in the corner, playing the role of the dutiful wife attending her husband's important meeting, while tension crackled through the air like electricity before a storm. Victoria entered precisely at 8, her red power suit and predatory smile announcing her intentions before she even spoke. She was followed by 3 board members Evangeline didn't recognize, and, most surprisingly, her father. Cornelius Rosewood looked older than she remembered, his face drawn and his hands shaking slightly as he took a seat across from Maximilian. He wouldn't meet her eyes. "Thank you all for coming on such short notice," Victoria began, her voice crisp and professional. "We have some urgent matters to discuss regarding Mr. Blackthorn's leadership of this company." Maximilian's expression remained neutral, but Evangeline could see the tension in his shoulders. "I wasn't aware my leadership was in question. It became a question when you started using company resources to pursue personal vendettas." Victoria opened a leather portfolio and spread several documents across the conference table. Private investigators, surveillance equipment, unauthorized access to sealed court records, all funded by Blackthorn Industries. "Those investigations are related to company security." "Are they?" Victoria's smile sharpened. "Because our forensic accountants have discovered some interesting patterns in your recent activities. She slid a photograph across the table. It showed Maximilian entering the private investigator's office 3 days earlier, with Evangeline clearly visible beside him. You've been investigating the Millbrook Recovery Center, a legitimate medical facility that treats some of our city's most vulnerable citizens. Victoria's voice was heavy with manufactured concern. Using your position to harass a psychiatric hospital suggests a troubling disconnect from reality. Evangeline felt her blood turn to ice. They'd been watched, their every move cataloged and documented. The trap had been closing around them for weeks. Furthermore, Victoria continued, we have evidence that your obsession with your sister's tragic accident has compromised your judgment in other areas. She nodded to Cornelius, who reluctantly pulled out another folder. Inside were copies of financial records, shipping manifests, and what appeared to be email correspondence. Mr. Rosewood has provided documentation proving that his daughter was planted in your life as part of an elaborate scheme. Victoria's eyes glittered with malicious satisfaction. Evangeline has been feeding information about your activities to interested parties since before your marriage. The accusation hit Evangeline like a physical blow. That's not true, isn't it? Victoria turned to face her directly. Your father's debts were forgiven remarkably quickly for someone with no leverage. Your marriage to Max was arranged with suspicious haste. And now, coincidentally, Max's investigation into sensitive matters has been compromised at every turn. Maximilian's face had gone completely blank, his carefully controlled mask sliding into place. But Evangeline could see the doubt flickering in his eyes, the way his gaze shifted away from hers. Max, you know me better than that. Do I? His voice was quiet, deadly. We've been married for 2 months, Evangeline. How well can I possibly know you? Cornelius finally spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. I'm sorry, sweetheart. They said if I didn't cooperate, they'd kill us both anyway. The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. Her father's nervousness, the rushed marriage, the convenient timing of everything. From the outside, it did look like an elaborate setup. You actually believe this? Evangeline said, staring at Maximilian in disbelief. The evidence is compelling. Victoria interjected smoothly. Phone records showing regular contact between Evangeline and known associates of Vincent Pemberton. Financial transfers that coincide with your investigation milestones. Even audio recordings of conversations. She pressed play on a small device, and Evangeline's own voice filled the room, distorted but recognizable. He's getting close to the truth about Serafina. The facility upstate, the financial records, all of it. The recording was doctored, had to be, but it sounded convincing enough to damn her in the eyes of anyone who wanted to believe it. I never said that. Evangeline's voice broke. Max, I swear to you I never. Enough. Maximilian stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. The meeting is over. Actually, it's not. Victoria's smile was triumphant. The board has voted to remove you as CEO of Blackthorn Industries, effective immediately. Your obsession with conspiracy theories and poor judgment in personal relationships have made you a liability. This is my company. Was your company. The majority shareholders have spoken. Victoria gathered her documents with practiced efficiency. Security will escort you from the building. Your personal effects will be forwarded. Evangeline watched in horror as 2 security guards entered the boardroom. Maximilian looked at her one last time, his expression completely closed off, before allowing himself to be led away. Max, please. Don't. His voice was like ice. Just don't. After he was gone, Victoria turned to Evangeline with mock sympathy. I'm sorry you had to see that, dear. But sometimes the kindest thing is to help someone face reality. You orchestrated all of this. I protected a company from a man who'd lost touch with sanity. Victoria checked her watch. Your marriage was based on lies anyway. Now you're both free to move on with your lives. Evangeline found herself alone in the empty boardroom, the city lights blurring through tears she refused to shed. Everything she'd thought she knew, everything she'd felt, had been twisted into evidence of betrayal. Her phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. Congratulations on your successful mission. Payment has been transferred as agreed. Even her phone had been compromised, made to look like confirmation of her treachery. The setup was perfect, thorough, and completely believable. By the time she made it back to the penthouse, Maximilian was gone. His clothes, his personal items, even the photograph of Serafina had been removed. It was as if he'd never existed in her life at all. Mrs. Chen found her sitting on the bedroom floor, staring at the empty space where his dresser used to be. "Mrs. Blackthorne, are you all right? He's gone, isn't he? Really gone?" Mrs. Chen's expression was carefully neutral. "Mr. Max left instructions for your belongings to be packed and shipped to your father's house." Even the housekeeper believed she was guilty. Evangeline closed her eyes and tried to figure out how everything had gone so wrong so quickly. Victoria Pemberton had outmaneuvered them completely, turning their love into a weapon against them and destroying any chance they might have had of saving Serafina. The worst part was that somewhere in a facility upstate, Maximilian's sister was still trapped, still waiting for a rescue that might never come. 3 weeks of silence stretched between them like an ocean of pain. Evangeline had returned to Charleston, to the suffocating familiarity of her childhood home, where her father moved through the rooms like a ghost haunted by his own guilt. They barely spoke, the weight of his betrayal hanging between them like a death shroud. The call came at 2 in the morning. "Mrs. Blackthorne, this is Detective Morrison." Evangeline sat up in bed, her heart hammering. "What's wrong? I need you to meet me. Now, there's something you need to see." An hour later, she found herself in a 24-hour diner on the outskirts of Charleston, facing Morrison across a cracked vinyl booth. He looked haggard, his clothes wrinkled like he'd been sleeping in his car. "They killed him," Morrison said without preamble. "Vincent Pemberton is dead." The words hit her like cold water. "What happened?" "Car bomb." Very professional, very clean. Morrison slid a newspaper across the table. The headline screamed about the prominent businessman's tragic death, complete with photos of the twisted wreckage. "But here's the interesting part. He was killed leaving a meeting with your uncle." "My uncle?" Evangeline's blood turned to ice. Bartholomew Rosewood, your father's brother. Turns out he's been Vincent's real partner all along." Morrison opened a thick file folder. "I've been digging since your husband got railroaded out of his company. Found some very interesting connections." The documents Morrison spread across the table painted a picture of corruption that went back decades. Bartholomew Rosewood had been using the family shipping business to launder money for various criminal enterprises, with Vincent Pemberton as his primary client. "Your uncle wasn't just helping with the money laundering," Morrison continued. "He was the one who ordered Serafina's kidnapping when she got too close to exposing their operation." Evangeline's hands shook as she read through the evidence. "But why kill Vincent now?" "Because Vincent was getting sloppy. The frame job on you and your husband worked, but it also drew too much attention. Your uncle decided to tie up loose ends." Morrison pulled out another photograph, this one showing 2 men in what appeared to be a heated argument outside a warehouse. Even from a distance, she could recognize her uncle's distinctive profile. This was taken the night before Vincent died. Looks like they had a falling out. "What about Victoria?" Victoria Pemberton inherited everything, including her uncle's dirty secrets. But she also inherited his enemies. Morrison's expression was grim. "Word is she's next on your uncle's cleanup list." Evangeline felt sick. However much she despised Victoria for what she'd done, the woman didn't deserve to die for her uncle's crimes. "There's more," Morrison said. "I found the nurse who quit Millbrook. She's willing to testify about what she saw there, but only if she gets federal protection." "What did she see?" Morrison hesitated, then pulled out a final photograph. It showed a woman with dark hair sitting in what appeared to be a medical office, her face turned toward the camera. But it wasn't the face Evangeline had expected. The woman in the photograph was older, her features marked by years of psychological trauma, but there was no mistaking the resemblance to Maximilian. This was Serafina Blackthorne, alive but broken after 5 years of captivity. "She's been systematically drugged and psychologically conditioned to forget her past," Morrison explained. "But the nurse says she's been getting stronger lately, starting to remember things." Evangeline stared at the photograph, tears streaming down her face. "We have to get her out of there." "We will. But first, we need to warn your husband about your uncle. Bartholomew knows Max is still investigating, and he's not going to let that continue. Max won't listen to me. He thinks I'm a spy, remember? Then we'll have to make him listen." Morrison pulled out his phone and dialed a number. After several rings, a familiar voice answered. "This is Maximilian Blackthorne." "Mr. Blackthorne, this is Detective Morrison. Your wife is with me, and we have information about your sister that you need to hear." There was a long pause. "Evangeline's in Charleston." "No, sir, She's sitting right here in a diner about 20 minutes from your current location. Another pause, longer this time. How do you know where I am? Because I've been tracking the man who's been tracking you. Bartholomew Rosewood has had you under surveillance since the night you left New York. Evangeline took the phone with trembling hands. Max, please. I know you don't trust me anymore, but Serafina is alive. We have proof. If this is some kind of trick. It's not a trick. Your sister is being held at Millbrook, and my uncle is the one who put her there. Her voice broke. I'm so sorry, Max. I'm sorry for everything. The silence stretched so long she thought he'd hung up. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely audible. Where are you? 20 minutes later, Maximilian walked into the diner looking like he'd aged 10 years in 3 weeks. His clothes were rumpled, his hair unkempt, and there were dark circles under his eyes that spoke of sleepless nights and endless guilt. He slid into the booth beside Morrison, carefully avoiding Evangeline's gaze as the detective laid out the evidence. With each document, each photograph, each piece of proof, the truth became undeniable. Victoria had been a pawn in her uncle's game. Cornelius had been blackmailed into cooperation, and Evangeline had been an innocent victim caught in the crossfire of a conspiracy that went back years before their marriage. When Morrison finished his presentation, Maximilian finally looked at Evangeline. The pain in his eyes was so raw, so devastating, that she had to grip the edge of the table to keep from reaching for him. I'm sorry, he said simply. I should have trusted you. You had every reason not to. The evidence was convincing. The evidence was fabricated. My faith in you should have been stronger than any evidence. Before Evangeline could respond, Morrison's phone buzzed with an urgent message. His face went pale as he read it. We need to move. Now. What's wrong? Victoria Pemberton was found dead an hour ago. Same MO as her uncle. Morrison was already gathering the documents. Your uncle is cleaning house, which means anyone connected to this investigation is now a target. Including us, Maximilian said grimly. Including all of us. We have maybe 6 hours before he figures out we've connected the dots. Evangeline felt terror and determination warring in her chest. They were running out of time, but they finally had the truth. And somewhere in an upstate facility, Serafina was waiting for rescue. What do we do? She asked. Maximilian reached across the table and took her hand, his fingers intertwining with hers like they belonged there. We finish this, he said. Together. The FBI raid on Millbrook Recovery Center happened at dawn, with Detective Morrison leading federal agents through the facility's corridors while Maximilian and Evangeline waited in an unmarked van outside the gates. The waiting was agony, each minute stretching like an hour as they listened to radio chatter and watched for signs of their mission's success. When the call finally came that Serafina had been found and was being transported to a real hospital, Evangeline felt Maximilian's entire body sag with relief beside her. She's alive, he whispered, as if saying it out loud would make it more real. Bartholomew Rosewood was arrested at his estate 6 hours later, surrounded by evidence of his decades-long criminal enterprise. The shipping records, the financial documents, even recordings of his conversations with Vincent Pemberton painted a clear picture of conspiracy, kidnapping, and murder. Cornelius, granted immunity in exchange for his testimony, finally told the complete truth about his involvement and his regret at being forced to betray his own daughter. But none of that mattered to Maximilian as he stood outside Serafina's hospital room, his hand hovering over the door handle like he was afraid to turn it. What if she doesn't remember me? He asked Evangeline. What if 5 years of conditioning has erased everything we were to each other? Evangeline placed her hand over his, steadying his trembling fingers. Then you'll help her remember. Love doesn't disappear, Max. It just gets buried sometimes. The woman sitting by the window was thinner than in the photographs, her dark hair streaked with premature gray, but when she turned at the sound of the door opening, her eyes were unmistakably blackthorn eyes. Max. Her voice was uncertain, fragile, but there was recognition there. Hey, little sister. Serafina rose from her chair on unsteady legs, and suddenly she was in his arms, both of them crying and laughing and holding each other like they'd never let go again. I knew you'd find me, she whispered against his shoulder. They try to make me forget, but I knew you'd never stop looking. Evangeline stepped back to give them privacy, but Serafina caught her hand. You're Evangeline. Max told me about you. He did. In his letters. The nurses thought they were therapy exercises, but Max was writing to me the whole time, telling me about the woman he fell in love with, about how you made him believe in happiness again. Evangeline looked at Maximilian in surprise. You wrote letters? Every day since you left, he admitted. I didn't know if you'd ever want to read them, but I needed to tell you how sorry I was, how much I loved you. The 3 weeks of separation, the pain and loneliness and desperate longing, suddenly felt worth it for this moment of reunion and truth. 6 months later, Evangeline stood in the same chapel where she'd married Maximilian the first time, but everything was different now. She wore her grandmother's wedding dress, the one she'd always dreamed of wearing, and carried flowers she'd chosen herself. The guests were people who loved them, not strangers fulfilling social obligations. Most importantly, when Maximilian took her hands and promised to love and cherish her, his words came from his heart instead of a script written by necessity. Do you, Maximilian James Blackthorne, take Evangeline Rose Rosewood to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold, in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer, for better or worse, as long as you both shall live? I do. Again and always I do. Do you, Evangeline Rose Rosewood, take Maximilian James Blackthorne to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold, in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer, for better or worse, as long as you both shall live? I do. With my whole heart, I do. When he kissed her this time, it was with 5 months of separation and rediscovered love, with the passion of two people who'd nearly lost everything and found their way back to each other. The reception was held at the Blackthorne estate, the sprawling property that Maximilian had reclaimed along with his company when Bartholomew's crimes came to light. Serafina, healthy and radiant after months of therapy, gave a toast that brought tears to everyone's eyes. My brother and sister-in-law taught me that love is the strongest force in the universe, she said, raising her champagne glass. It survives separation, it conquers fear, and it never, ever gives up. To Max and Evangeline, who proved that some love stories are worth fighting for. Later that night, as they danced on the terrace under a canopy of stars, Maximilian pulled Evangeline closer and whispered in her ear, I have something for you. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small leather journal, worn from handling. Your letters? Every one. I wrote to you every day we were apart, telling you about my day, about missing you, about all the ways I planned to make up for doubting you. Evangeline opened the journal and read the first entry, dated the night after their confrontation in the boardroom. The pain and regret in his words made her throat tight with emotion. I love you, Evangeline Blackthorne, he said, using her married name like a promise. Not because of circumstances or convenience or necessity. I love you because you're brave and kind and you see the best in people, even when they don't deserve it. I love you too, Max. Not the man I married the first time out of obligation, but the man who writes letters to his wife every day and never stops believing in happy endings. They swayed together in the moonlight, surrounded by the people they loved, with a future stretching out before them full of possibility and hope. And in the distance, through the French doors leading to the house, they could see Serafina laughing with friends, alive and free and whole again. Some fairy tales, Evangeline thought as Max spun her around the dance floor, are worth fighting for.